One man's name has become synonymous with crime in the 1930s. Feared and respected, idolized and immortalized on screen countless times. Regarded by some as the ultimate gangster.
He's here, gentlemen.
But who was he really? What do we actually know about him?
It's all yours, Al. Me, I'm quitting.
At only 26 years old, Alphonse Gabriel Capone would become the boss of one of the biggest crime syndicates America has ever known. But this was just the beginning of the Al Capone story. We all know the name. But what do we really know about the man? Why is it that his name sits above so many others?
The day that I learned about Al Capone in school, I went back to my grandfather and I told him that I had learned about this guy, Al Capone. He said, "Oh yeah, what did they teach you?" Well, they taught me that he was a thief and a robber and he killed people. He said, "Oh yeah, is that all they taught you? Did he tell you that he gave people jobs?" No. Did they tell you that he gave people soup in the time when they couldn't get soup at the other kitchens? No. Did they tell you that he had given money to build an orphanage? I said, no. He goes, what kind of school you go to, they teach you this. Next time you go to school, don't pay attention to everything they say. Come and ask me next. What I learned was that Al Capone was many things. He was almost anything to anybody, which is what makes him such a good mythological figure.
My name is Deirdre Marie Capone. I am Al Capone's grandniece. Was Al Capone a mobster? Yes, he was. Was Al Capone a monster? No, he was not.
The myth has become the reality, and that's the difficult part of it. Once something has been said so many times, it becomes the norm. The myth is so enormous that we have to go back to the sources.
I keep wondering if there were signs early on of what Al Capone would become. By all accounts, he came from a stable, caring family. No evidence of cruelty or violence or abuse. So what led him down that path? We know that his father, Gabriel Capone, was 29 years old when he boarded the ship, the Werra, bound for America. Alongside his pregnant wife, Teresa, 27, and their 2 children. It was a time of mass immigration to America. In the 1890s, over 600,000 Italians would make the crossing.
The prejudice against Italians was tremendous. The Italians were the largest immigrant group to come during that period. And people didn't know when these numbers were going to stop. You can go back and look at political cartoons of the time, and they show Italians swarming onto the shores like little rats with knives in their teeth.
They were the last to be hired and the first to be fired. There's signs that were out in the window. If you're Italian, don't apply for a job here.
They had to learn not only to navigate the world in a foreign language, but they had to do it without skills that would have gotten them jobs. The system fails the immigrant, and so the immigrant must resort to other ways of doing things.
The family moved to a small apartment at 95 Navy Street in Brooklyn. And it's here, 5 years after their arrival, that Alphonse Gabriel Capone was born on the 17th of January, 1899. The first child conceived and born in their adopted America.
Capone grew up very poor. He was one of 9 kids and really had to start working pretty young to try to help his family out. His parents were law-abiding citizens. His father was a barber in Brooklyn. Barber's salary wasn't going to feed 9 kids, so he and his brothers all went to work at a pretty young age.
He eventually leaves school at 14, having apparently beaten up one of the teachers.
And for me, psychologically, that tells us a couple of things. One, he had no respect for authority. Or is it that he felt anger and rage?
He pretty much grew up on the streets.
Street gangs were prevalent at the time, and Al's early involvement with Brooklyn gangs exposed him to people who would go on to lead him down a far darker path.
He was a bruiser. He grew to about 5'11", and he's hefty.
What happens when you see a tough guy on the street, the gangsters begin to put them to work. One time I did something I regretted. I held this guy who somebody else beat up. When it was all over, I had blood on my shirt. The guy peeled off a $50 bill and threw it to me. So when you see that kind of money come out, it's like, whoa. When you are around that violence, you begin to take it for granted, and you begin to think of it as an option. Wow, this is pretty profitable.
I think as the son of an immigrant, it would have taken him a long time to find his sense of self, to figure out who he wanted to relate to and why. But in finding that he was good at something, finding a foothold in his criminal career, gave him a very, very strong sense of identity.
He's connected with the 5 Points gang, which is one of the leading gangs at the time.
His opportunities are pretty limited as an uneducated first-generation immigrant, and suddenly he sees a way that if he's willing to take some risks, he can make some good money. He found himself working at a place called the Harvard Inn on Coney Island, which was definitely not an Ivy League establishment. This was a really rough bar owned by a guy named Frankie Yale. Frankie Yale was a really tough guy. He ran the ice rackets in Brooklyn. If you tried to sell ice without Frankie's approval, you were going to end up with an ice pick in your knee. That's the kind of guy Frankie was, and that's the guy Capone went to work for as a teenager. So he's hanging around the Harvard Inn, and he's meeting some of the toughest, most dangerous guys in New York, and he's getting ideas. This is what it takes to be successful.
So Capone's working at Frankie Yale's Harvard Inn in 1917, and a fight breaks out. A fight that Capone's responsible for starting, and one, in a way, that he'd never recover from. When we think of gangsters, what's the name we think of first? Al Capone. But who was he really? How did he get those infamous scars?
When he was just a teenager working at the Harvard Inn, he saw a girl that he liked. He started talking to her, and she told him to get lost. Capone didn't give up quite so easily. He approached her again, maybe 2 or 3 times, and finally, this girl's brother stepped in.
We're not sure whether it was using a knife or whether it was actually using a bottle. whatever it was, it left Capone with 3 deep scars down his cheeks.
Al Capone is 17 years old, and he's just been marked for life. He's been made to look like a criminal, scarred by violence. Did this turn him away from leading a normal life? Did it change him?
He's a young man, he's a teenager. He hasn't found a wife yet. Suddenly he's got these 3 brutal, really bright scars across his face and neck. You can't avoid seeing it. It's probably the first thing you notice when you look at him. So this must have been, really traumatic.
When you're looking at a young person who's been scarred, they can go one of 2 ways. Either they're going to take it inward and be very insular about what's happened, try and hide it, try and disguise it. Or you might have someone who eventually turns that into something else where they feel the rage from what's happened to them.
At this stage in his life, Capone's still just hired muscle. He's not a gangster. Not yet. In 1918, Al would meet the woman he'd spend the rest of his life with, May, a devout Irish Catholic from a respectable family. They would get married 3 weeks after the birth of their only child, Albert Francis Sonny Capone.
Capone was a very good husband and father, in a peculiar way. He loved his only child, Sonny. He absolutely adored him. He rang his mother and his wife every single night. He would phone them. He was, and he wanted to be, a family man. But he played around.
And in those days, playing around had serious consequences.
During Al's youth, syphilis was very, very common.
He probably contracted syphilis as a young man in his early 20s and didn't seek the treatment that could have nipped it in the bud.
Alcohol was seen to be one of the big contributing factors to the spread of venereal disease. Perception was that people were more likely to engage in extramarital sexual encounters if they had been drinking.
Around the turn of the century, there was a movement to see about maybe banning alcohol.
And liquor has no more business in the Constitution of my country than a rattlesnake has in your baby's cradle.
The National Women's Christian Temperance Union announces a campaign for the prohibition of the manufacture and sale of alcoholic beverages.
It seems so bizarre looking at it now, that an entire country would ban the sale and production of alcohol to try and curb its social ills.
Al Capone turned 21 just as Prohibition was becoming the law. It passes at a time when the nation was really more conservative, and unfortunately by the time it becomes the law in the early 1920s, those attitudes have changed. People no longer want to sacrifice, they want to have a good time. But now we've got this law that we passed a while ago. So what happens when you take away one of the biggest industries in America, a business that brings pleasure to people, and you say it's over? You can't go to your local liquor store, you can't go to your local bar. Some people might decide that they're going to take that into their own hands.
There was one criminal that would alter the course of Al's life like no other.
When Capone was working at the Harvard Inn on Coney Island, he met a lot of powerful people, and one of them was Johnny Torrio.
Johnny Torrio was one of the brightest people in that business. If it wasn't for Johnny Torrio, Al Capone would have never been able to be what he was.
Torrio was much older and a very careful, dignified guy who treated the crime work that he did as a serious undertaking, something not to be handled capriciously.
He goes home every night to his wife. He treats it as a 9-to-5 job, even though that 9-to-5 job is extraordinarily violent. He really takes to Capone and he takes him under his wing. I think he sees Capone as brighter than the average thug, and he trains him up. He he realized that here was an intelligent man who could actually do the job well.
Torrio eventually left New York and moved to Chicago, where he became one of the biggest of all operators in the underworld. Torrio recruited Capone to come to Chicago.
So it's 1920. Al's now living in Chicago. In the early 20th century, it's very much a working-class city. It has a population of about 2.8 million, which has doubled almost every decade since the mid-19th century.
It's a crazy town then because it was growing so fast. It seemed out of control at times, and that led to a kind of wildness, a kind of lawlessness.
The great thing about Prohibition for gangsters is that it provides all sorts of different options. You can distill, you can brew, you can ship, and of course, because it's illegal, you can hijack other people's.
He's working for Johnny Torrio, but at this point, he isn't the man at the top in Chicago. So who is?
Johnny Torrio goes over to Chicago to work for his uncle, Jim Colosimo,
who is the man in town.
He's a ruthless businessman. He's built up an empire of 100 brothels.
He not only runs brothels and gambling operations, he runs one of the most popular restaurants.
Jim will become the catalyst for Capone's success. Colosimo didn't really want to change things. He knew his business. He was very good at the brothel business. He felt he had a formula that worked. He could see that other groups had managed to buy up most of the breweries and the distilleries in the area, so he thought they'd be starting from scratch. He's dragging his heels, whereas Torrio is ambitious. He rightly thinks that Prohibition will be the making of any criminal enterprise during the 1920s.
Torrio knows that regardless of the law, people will always want to drink. And whoever fills the glasses is going to get rich.
There's a growing sense that something has to be done.
On May the 11th, 1920, Colosimo gets out of his car and walks into his restaurant. Chicago police, acting on tips, theorized that the person responsible was none other than Brooklyn mobster and Al Capone's old employer at the Harvard Inn, Frankie Yale.
I think there's a pretty decent chance that Capone was involved in the hit on Big Jim. He was young, he was new in town. It's the kind of thing that Johnny Torrio might have expected a new guy to do to prove himself. But nobody saw Capone there, so we really don't know.
No one was ever convicted for the crime, surprisingly.
Now we have Johnny Torrio right at the top of the pile. And who does he take with him? 1920 was a big year for Al Capone. With Jim Colosimo, the head of the Chicago outfit, dead, and the opportunities for bootlegging growing by the day, the money is starting to roll in.
He's running 100 brothels. He expands into bootlegging, but he also expands into all sorts of other businesses.
They can't keep track of it all. They can't even keep track of how much money's coming in.
Then on November the 14th, his father, Gabriel, dies at 55 years old, and Al becomes the new head of the family.
Once Capone started making a little bit of money, he brought his whole family with him from Brooklyn. He moved his mother, his brothers, and sister into this big house on South Prairie Avenue.
His older brothers, Frank and Ralph, start working with him in the business.
Suddenly, he's not just the family man, he's the leader of the family. In some ways, he's stepping in for his dad to supply and to provide for the entire crew.
Chicago is a divided city. Turf wars are raging, especially between the Northside Gang and Torrio's outfit.
Once Big Jim was out of the way, Chicago was wide open. Suddenly, the amount of money he could make explodes infinitely. Torrio and Capone, they had the best operation in Chicago, the best and the biggest operation. They were smart enough to go to some of the breweries and say, hey, the feds have shut you down. We'll put you back in business. We'll take all the risk. We just want you to keep producing some beer for us, and we'll distribute it. We'll pay you for your time. A lot of other guys have the same idea. So rivals emerge all over town, and Capone and Torrio can't keep them all at bay.
The Northside Gang is run by an Irishman, Dean O'Banion.
Dean O'Banion was a thorn in the side of the outfit.
Who ran a flower shop by day and used that flower shop for cover.
The interesting thing about the North Side is even though they're quite a small gang, they have very cleverly bought up almost all the breweries, so they have control of the product. And that puts them in a very strong position.
These guys were in constant battle. There was sort of a code that if you took out one of my guys, I'm going to take out one of your guys. And then once you introduced the Tommy gun and the much greater firepower, then the death counts started to rise.
Dean O'Banion is killed in 1924.
And that led to Jaime Weiss and Bugs Moran, the head of the North Side. They would have to seek revenge.
Capone and his brothers move operations out of Chicago Central and into one of the suburbs called Cicero, where they have the local city manager in their pocket and manage to do pretty much what they want.
There's an election out there. They want to make sure people vote right. The election is being tampered with, that voters are being intimidated. A judge hears about this and sends a bunch of police officers to turn back these gangsters from the polls to let the people vote. Shooting breaks out, and Frank Capone gets killed.
On January the 10th, 1925, Capone's sedan was strafed with machine gun fire. On January the 24th, Torrio and his wife Anne were set upon by Moran and Weiss. Several shots hit Torrio, but when Weiss went to deliver the coup de grace, the gun jammed and the two fled.
Johnny Torrio received really significant bullet wounds, and everyone thinks that he can't possibly make it through this. Capone takes this shooting really to heart. He sleeps by Torrio's bed every night in a cot that he has made up, and he is the person that takes care of the day-to-day running of the business while Torrio is incapacitated. His time in hospital really is where we see this passing of the baton to Al Capone.
Against all odds, Torrio would recover from his wounds. He would be taken straight from his hospital bed to prison to serve a short sentence for bootlegging, though there are some who suggest this prison sentence came about as a result of Torrio's own negotiating. After all, where could be safer than a prison where he could buy off the guards?
If you run into a situation where your life is threatened or you begin to think differently,
there's something really deeply ingrained here about the legacy building of this kind of industry. It wouldn't be enough just to have it exist and for it to completely fall apart. Any good leader knows that you hand on your empire.
When Capone is 26, he really faces a huge crossroads. Capone could have said, you know what, I'm good. I've made enough money. I'd like to get back to my family. I can take the money I've made and set up a legitimate business somewhere. You're getting out, I'm going to get out too. But no, he actually embraces this new challenge.
So Al Capone, at only 26, is handed the keys to the kingdom.
He takes over the running of the business and no one objects to it. So it was obvious that he was actually the ordained. He was 26 years old when he took over a business which in today's terms was worth $1.5 billion. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing at 26 years old.
And I think there's a part of him that really likes the attention that comes with this job.
With this change in leadership comes a new way of interacting with the public and the media. Al Capone loved the limelight.
His garishly coloured suits, his pale grey fedora that he always wore, his overcoat that he always wore. These are symbols of Capone.
The Italians have some very important codes, and one of them is the code of bella figura. You got to make yourself look better than you actually are. You never let people know exactly what's going on inside of you, especially in front of public audiences.
He wanted to dress like a banker, except even more. So he would go with bigger, wider pinstripes and brighter colors. He wanted to show a certain lifestyle, and not just because he wanted to show off that he was making money, he wanted to be taken seriously.
Sound and image are coming together to create newsreels.
He's probably the first real media gangster that we have. And he becomes iconic.
They started making movies with characters based on him.
That would really kind of feed into his ego. So there's really strong elements of narcissism there.
This kind of attention is validation. That, how bad can I really be if all these people are paying attention to me?
That's why he's given interviews to the newspapers. He's given interviews to Cosmo magazine, a women's magazine, right? He's basically saying, why don't you understand me? I'm just a good guy. I'm just an American entrepreneur.
He was a businessman. He had a very successful business. He supplied the demand. People wanted to be in bars. They wanted to have alcohol, and he supplied the alcohol.
He has an oversized personality, a nodding relationship with the truth, but he's charming, a bit like people regard Trump today.
One of Capone's great strokes of genius was that he realized that you don't keep all the money. You hand it out. You make friends. When people were really struggling, he gave people jobs. He was responsible for, opening a soup kitchen on the South Side.
The Italians weren't always allowed into the typical soup kitchens that were up. Capone was responsible for creating alternative soup kitchens that, that actually had good food that the Italians would eat, because Italians are very particular about their food. But he also had people come to him and complain about buying spoiled milk. I don't think he went to City Hall and did it himself, but he made sure that the expiration dates were put on milk cartons in Chicago. You can only do this when you have so much money you don't know what to do with your money. But also when you do have some compassion for the people that are your people.
You see this kind of Robin Hood type character come to life. And I think that really fed the story, the facade, the character that he wanted to portray to the outside world. Like a lot of men in his position, he was able to groom people to do the dirty work. He had a really compelling vision and could compel people and draw them into his vision.
If you want to stay in business a while, you got to have friends. So he buys off the cops. He buys off the courts. He can't get arrested if he tries.
He understands that in order to protect himself, he's got to buy everyone else off. At his height, Capone probably had 60% of the Chicago Police Department in his pocket. They always say about Capone that if you met him, he was absolutely charming. He would have a glint in his eye and he would just have this great smile. But it could turn, and he would suddenly become a reptile. There's a story about how when he found out that there was an assassination attempt against him, he beat one of the victims to death with a baseball bat. It's estimated that in the period of the 1920s that we're interested in, there were 700 gangland killings in Chicago, of which 200 are associated with Capone's gang.
Sometimes it felt like the Wild West in Chicago. You just have guys, rolling by shooting at each other, seemingly unprovoked, for grudges that you couldn't keep track of after a while. we start to get a little pushback. You start to see business leaders going to Washington, D.C. and saying, you got to help us, because our local elected officials, they're not doing anything. People are afraid to do business in Chicago. They're afraid to come here as tourists. So there's a growing sense that something has to be done, that this is becoming a national problem, that lawlessness is out of control.
At 10:30 in the morning, on St. Valentine's Day 1929, 7 men associated with George Bugs Moran's bootlegging operation were inside a garage in the Lincoln Park neighborhood of Chicago's North Side. 4 men, 2 wearing police uniforms, pulled up in a police car and entered the garage. They drew guns and forced the men to line up against a wall, shoulder to shoulder. At first, Moran's men offered no resistance until a side door opened and 2 other men carrying Thompson submachine guns entered.
The pictures go straight into the press, and no one holds back.
Folks are drinking their coffee and eating their Wheaties, looking at the newspaper, and suddenly this gruesome, bloody scene is right in front of them. We have the impression that Capone was responsible. But it makes no sense. He already knew the feds were breathing down his neck. People thought the cops did it because when one of the Gusenberg boys who died in the garage was still alive when police got there, he said it was the cops that did it. Well, there's a bunch of different possible theories, but I don't think we're ever going to really know. Either way, there's a sense that this is going too far. Up until that point, crime fighting had always been considered a local issue. It was left to your police chief and your sheriff, but now the federal government is getting involved, and J. Edgar Hoover is taking over the FBI and building a national response to crime.
Never before was there a greater need for unity, for a calm appraisal of the forces which work against us.
Is this the beginning of the end for Capone? Seems like he's finally got a problem on his hands he can't buy his way out of. But the fortunes of the whole nation are about to change. So, things are beginning to shift now for Capone. His image is tarnished. The press have turned on him. And now the federal government have labelled him public enemy number 1.
The president, Herbert Hoover, no relation to J. Edgar Hoover or the FBI, starts talking to his cabinet. What are we going to do about Capone? We can't have this kind of stuff on the front page of the newspaper. We can't have these gangland killings anymore. We either have to enforce prohibition or we have to strike it from the books. But we can't just keep looking the other way. So he decides that he's going to do something about it. This is the president deciding that he's going to get involved in an effort to take down Al Capone.
The Wall Street crash of 1929 was a catastrophic collapse in the world economy, which would take a generation to recover from.
We are now into this horrible depression. The economy is tanking, stock market is nosedived, people are losing their fortunes. They're blaming President Hoover for this, and he figures that going after Al Capone will make him look good. Now you'd think it'd be pretty easy, right? Because Capone is admitting that he's a bootlegger. He's obviously making a fortune selling booze and running guns and keeping brothels, casinos. How hard could it be to take this guy out? But remember, the Chicago cops aren't going to do it. Capone was also very careful. He didn't put a lot of the business in his own name, so it wasn't clear how they were going to take him down. You've got federal prohibition agents trying to stop Capone, and they're raiding his breweries and his brothels looking for evidence of crime, but they can't pin anything on him. But there's a federal prosecutor, a U.S. attorney named George E.Q. Johnson. The Justice Department has asked him to find a way to prosecute Al Capone. And he says, what about his taxes? Has he been paying his taxes? Capone was not paying taxes. all of his income was illegal. And the federal government said to him, hey, we'd like to talk to you about your taxes. You haven't filed any returns in years. Capone actually offered to pay taxes. He said, here's how much I think I made. Tell me what I owe you. And after a while, the negotiations fell apart. So Capone had a chance to get out of this, but he didn't. He didn't pay. Capone should have realized that this was a pretty good situation for him, right? The best they can do is come after me for income tax evasion. I'm going to hire myself a really good lawyer, and I'll probably pay a settlement, and I'll be good. But when this went to trial, Capone didn't hire a good tax lawyer. He hired one of the usual lawyers who he turned to anytime he got in trouble with the law. And this guy really didn't know tax law that well.
The biggest mistake they make is Capone is convicted of not providing tax returns for 1925 and 1926. Well, the law didn't demand that he had to until 1927. So they could have argued that quite clearly, which would have really damaged the prosecution's case. But they don't do that. It's ridiculous. They just don't seem to know it. The judge is determined that Capone is going to go down no matter what happens. He manages to stop Capone from tampering with the jury because he changes the jury the night before the actual trial. He swaps the jury with another jury. They're all from outside Chicago, rural characters, and they're absolutely shocked by Capone's behavior because Capone arrives on the first day of the trial in a suit that is described as glaring banana yellow. So they're pretty baffled by the whole of Capone anyway. They don't have any empathy with him. They certainly wouldn't have been the jury that Capone would have chosen.
Capone was convicted on 5 counts of income tax evasion on October the 17th, 1931. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison.
My grandfather got 3 years in the federal penitentiary for the same amount of money that he didn't declare on his income tax. Al Capone got 11 years for the same amount, the same thing. I mean, that's unheard of.
If you look at what he was convicted of, today, more people are convicted of the same crime, and it's just a simple fine.
I'm not saying he was a good guy, and I'm not saying he was innocent, and I'm not saying that he didn't deserve to go to jail, but he got a much stiffer sentence for income evasion than he should have gotten.
Capone would serve his sentence in the infamous Alcatraz prison, a place reserved for the most dangerous criminals of the time.
They built Alcatraz at a ridiculously high cost to try to deter crime. And what better way to call attention to your new tough-on-crime approach than by putting Al Capone there? And he's only a tax evasion conviction, right? Why do you got to put him in Alcatraz? But it's clear that they want to send a message. And this is really a new phase in American history, this emphasis on showing that we're tough on crime, building more prisons, something that really still runs through our society today.
He started off not knowing who he was to finding a really strong character, so strong that he wears a costume, to suddenly be imprisoned, where everything that provided that sense of status and character is stripped away from him. He's just now a man, and he's a very ill man.
His health began to fail. After spending years of his life on the edge, syphilis was now taking a serious toll on him.
We know that Al Capone lived with inadequately treated syphilis for a very long time, which is why he entered into a tertiary stage later on in his life. It's a slow degeneration of your nervous system that comes with cognitive and motor impairment, dementia, mood swings, delusions, hallucinations, personality changes, violent outbursts. Your entire person and sense of self changes, sometimes beyond all recognition.
In 1939, he was released from Alcatraz due to his failing health, and he returned to his mansion in Florida. But the once powerful gangster was a shadow of his former self.
Most people think he died in prison, but he didn't. He got out and lived another 10 years in Florida.
The Al Capone that I knew, he was kind of like a big child. I was by his side with my father, and he would call me baby girl. He said, baby girl, I love you, and baby girl, baby girl. And my father turned to me, he said, Deirdre, we've got to go back to Chicago. You've got to go back to school. So we got on the train and we came back to Chicago. The next day, my grandfather called and said, Al just died.
He died on January the 25th, 1947, at the age of 48.
His body was paraded through Chicago in a hearse, and people were lining up on the streets with their hands over their hearts, their hats in their hands, their heads bowed when his casket went by. The church was filled with people. Yeah, it was quite something to see.
So who was Al Capone? A hardened thug who was also a savvy business leader who might have been a successful CEO or even president in another life. A brutal bully who yet handed out food to the poor. A caring husband who rang his wife every night, but whose countless infidelities exposed her to syphilis. A loving father who was yet responsible for countless cold-blooded murders. The truth is, he was all those things, and yet as powerful and influential as Al Capone was, like all of us, he was still subject to the whims of history.
We love the idea of Capone as a morality tale. You know, here's the man who makes this vast fortune from illegal and violent means. We can't have him win. He's got to be brought to justice. He's not only got to be brought to justice, but he's got to be seen to suffer.
This is what we don't want you to do. This is evil. If you do this, you will end up dead. People didn't understand that even the dead gangsters become heroes to somebody. People who understood why the gangster rebelled against the system began to see that as a potential model for rebelling against the system.
But what lessons are there to be taken from Capone's legacy? Why are we still talking about him, almost 100 years later? His story reflects the contradictions of America. A nation built on law and order, yet rife with corruption and rebellion.
We've seen lots of criminals live out loud in America, feeling like they're above the law, and that if they don't try to hide what they're doing, they might just get away with it.
One thing's for certain, the legend of Al Capone will continue.
These